deal with Mexico to stop asylum seekers entering the US. But did his own administration get the memo? We'll investigate tonight. Evening, everyone, and welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism. With me, live in Los Angeles, Candace Owens, Teslin Figueroa, and Chris Buskirk. And what a packed show we have. The establishment plot to undermine the president, the future of the American worker, school choice and race, wildfires and climate change, plus my take on Britain's Brexit shambles, and a big announcement about my role here at Fox. But first, let's get straight to the big story tonight, and that's the confusion over immigration. Here's the timeline. Last night, President Trump announced a new Get Tough policy on asylum seekers, saying migrants at the southern border will not be allowed into the United States until their claims are individually approved in court, adding, all will stay in Mexico. If for any reason it becomes necessary, we will close our southern border. Then, just a couple of hours later, a Washington Post article quoted incoming Mexican Interior Minister Olga Sanchez Cordero saying, quote, for now, we have agreed to this policy of remain in Mexico. But just hours later, Cordero backpedaled, saying, here there is no agreement of any sort between the future Mexican federal government and the US. So, is there a deal or not? And what about all the other questions left unanswered? Is this new policy just going to be overturned in the courts? Don't we need Congress to change the law on all this? What does closing the border really mean? It seems to me that the president is 100% right on this, but is being badly let down by his White House team, the responsible cabinet secretaries, and Congress itself. Now, we couldn't find anyone from anywhere in the administration who'd talk about this tonight. But I'm joined now by Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. He's on the subcommittee for immigration and border security. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate that very much. I've got a simple question, which I know is in the minds of many of our viewers. It was 2 years where Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress and the White House. Why is there no border wall?
Because we've had a failure to deliver on our promise. I mean, look, Steve, I had a bill that would build the border wall, and it would fund it off the general fund. So it wouldn't be general funds. They assigned it, my leadership team signed it to 7 committees, which is the death knell for a bill. And so I'm urging my leaders.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I want to get to the detail, because so often in this debate, we say, build the wall, yes, we should, whatever. But the details matter. So, and one of the things I keep hearing, and it sounds like you've got an answer to it, is, well, Congress has to approve the money. The president can't just take it out of the budget. It sounds like you're saying, thanks to your bill, he could just take it out of a budget that's already there and get the wall built. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, in my bill, I was funding it so it wouldn't even come out of general fund dollars, and we'd be able to tax other forms, you know, like these people who are coming over here, like this group here that Mexico is letting in. Well, if they're Mexican nationals coming in, we would reduce their foreign aid in an amount to help build the wall. Same for all of these things. We can do this where the other nations are paying for the problem they are causing. That's what my bill did, and it also funded, by the way, Border Patrol agents who had their salaries reduced while working under the Obama administration. That's why we have stations in Arizona, for instance, that have fewer than 50% of their complement at those Border Patrol stations, because they're getting demoralized and leaving.
So okay, I still don't understand, I'm afraid. What's the blockage here? You have Republicans of all descriptions elected on a promise to control immigration, and it didn't happen in the last 2 years. Now the Democrats have taken over the House. Seems like it's even less likely. Why didn't it happen? And can the president act on this, even though we've lost, for those who want border control more tightly managed, half of Congress?
Yeah, so three questions. I'll answer them as quickly as I can. Number one, it didn't happen because we have members of the Republican conference who don't want a border wall or border security. That's problem one. I think we can do it in the lame duck. I'm urging my leadership to bring it to my bill, or even if it's Kevin McCarthy's bill. I don't really care whose bill, as long as it's a straight border wall bill this next week or two. We can do that. We can get that done, and we can get it over and get it to the Senate. So that's problem one. The other problem is that the Senate doesn't have the horses to get it across either. So there's two big hurdles. But you're right. You said something in your monologue that I think is correct as well. The cabinet level secretary, and I'm going to point out Secretary Nielsen, it has not been helping us too much to get this done. And I mean, look, there was a caravan in April, and I feel like we've been woefully prepared for this one. So we have to face the fact that some of our leaders have let us down, and Congress has let us down. And I feel bad about that, but that's where we need to go.
Okay, sorry, last question. It's just very frustrating, right? Because, fine, you're going to put your bill through. You've told me it's not basically going to go anywhere because the Senate aren't going to get it through because you need the... Why can't the president, one of the chief executive, right? Commander-in-chief, defending the border feels like a basic part of that. Why can't he just do that without Congress? Is that really unconstitutional?
I think he can. I think in some respects we gave him authority to redirect some money. So I think he can. I think he can close the border. I think he can stop the asylum. We're fighting the courts as well, though. I mean, you've got some rogue judges that are out there that are trying to tell him he can't do what I think he can do constitutionally and others think he can do as well.
Okay, Congressman, appreciate that. Thank you for coming on. I do appreciate it. Good luck with the bill. It sounds like is what we need to happen. I want to bring in Teresa Cardinal Brown now, just exactly on that point that we were just hearing about. She's the former U.S. Customs and Border Protection and Homeland Security official, and now the Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Some of those legal questions there that Congressman mentioned, I particularly want to focus on one of them, which is asylum. That's a big part of this story, because you've got people presenting themselves at the border, making claims for asylum, and that's really one of the things that has been so hard to manage. What's the legal situation there? Because I've heard people say, well, actually, there's international law that means that if someone shows up at the border and claims asylum, there's basically nothing you can do about that, despite what the president may be saying. Is that correct?
Well, the United States is party to international protocols on refugees and asylum seekers. That's true. But in this case, it is U.S. law that says that an immigrant who is in the United States or who arrives in the United States, whether or not at a port of entry, has the ability to ask for asylum and apply for asylum. That is in U.S. law.
Which U.S. law? So we're really clear.
It's in the
When was it passed?
In the Immigration and Nationality Act. It was passed in 1980.
Very helpful. So does that mean that when the president says you're not going to be able to, if you make an asylum claim, you're going to have to stay in Mexico, is that promise consistent with that law?
Well, I would say it depends. We have to allow individuals who arrive in the United States a chance to apply for asylum. What I understand is being discussed with Mexico right now is that after they have applied, rather than being released into the United States to await the outcome of their hearing in immigration court, they would be returned to Mexico to await the outcome there. Now, there is a provision in our immigration law that permits that. It has not been used previously because it requires Mexico to agree to allow these non-Mexicans to go back to Mexico to wait there. And we have never had a prior agreement to do that.
That's really helpful. So you're saying that so if this agreement works, and as I understand it, the top members of the Mexican government, the incoming administration, are meeting today to agree this. If they agree to what President Trump is saying, then that would be lawful. Just to clarify, you're saying that.
There is a provision of law that says that someone who applies at a port of entry and is not admissible, but is appealing that in an immigration court, including an application for asylum, can be returned to contiguous territory, in this case Mexico, to wait that asylum claim. As I said, it's never been done before because it would require Mexico to accept them back. Now, I can't say that whether or not this was going to be lawful. It depends a lot on what the agreement says, how it's implemented, where it's implemented, and what happens to the individuals in Mexico. There's a lot of pieces that we still don't know.
We certainly don't, but I appreciate you clearing up some of that for us tonight. Teresa, thank you very much. All right, let's see what everyone around the table thinks. Candace, let's start with you. I mean, look, big picture. On this particular crisis at the border now. They said, didn't they, in the midterm election campaign, oh, this is all a stunt. President Donald Trump's going around whipping up fear of immigrants because he wants, for votes in the election. it's a real problem.
It's a very real problem. And look, this is a national security issue. Just think about this. If we're talking about open borders and we don't have policies and we can't secure our borders, the position that we are in, we have real enemies overseas. What's stopping them from taking a plane over to Mexico and entering in this country by the very same means that this immigrant caravan is entering in?
And it's not just the security aspect, Tezin. I want to ask you to comment on the economic aspect. One of the things I was interested in reading was even in the New York Times report, and, you know, they're no fan at all of the president's immigration policy, but when they were describing the numbers in the caravan who've arrived at Tijuana, and they talked about the fact that hundreds of the over 6,500 were there to claim asylum, and the rest were there for economic migrants. And so this whole argument that, well, we've got to be compassionate, they're fleeing asylum, actually it's an economic point that's going on here, and it's exactly those people that who would come in for work in the US who actually would threaten the economic prospects of the same people that supported Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders.
Sure, absolutely. And some other numbers that I want to point out. You know, I've been in trouble for making this statement, and I'm going to double down again on it tonight. My issue is the hypocrisy, especially particularly with the left. You have a crime bill right now that Cory Booker's begging for people to get on board. When we talk about mass incarceration going from 500,000 in 1980 to 2.2 million now, there are American citizens who are locked up right now, but yet our concern is on those who are trying to break in America. But we're doing nothing to help those who are trying to break out of jails in America. It's not just, I was a police officer in the military, so I believe in doing the crime and doing the time, but it is also important to point out that 97% of people in jail took a plea deal because they did not have adequate representation. So this government is saying, if Democrats are saying, we want to make sure people have due process, we want to make sure that people can apply for asylum, where is the due process for those who have been enslaved more than those black men who are in jail, more now than those in 1850 who were enslaved? So this is a real issue that I have. It is a very sore spot for me, because I seem to take offense. I'm very empathetic to those who need, you know, who want to seek refugees. But when I look at people who are in my community, I come from the 90s, I grew up in the 90s. Hundreds of people were destroyed through Bill Clinton's crime bill, and nothing's been being told about that.
I just want to say thank you for saying that. You're exactly right. The #1 group of individuals that are negatively impacted by illegal immigration are young black men, okay? So this is directly going to impact negatively the black community, and that is a conversation that needs to be started and needs to be continued to be had.
And it's exactly right. And so for exactly that reason and many more, you know, Democrats who now have the power that they've been looking for, certainly in the House, they should be cheering the president on and trying to help him do this, not standing in the way, which looks like what's going to happen. Chris, I just want to bring you in here. This issue of immigration, for all its different ramifications, particularly the economic, is a defining one for the populist movement, both here and elsewhere. How would you say the Trump administration, in the first 2 years, how have they handled it?
The Trump administration, where it's had authority to handle it from the executive side of the ledger, has done a B, sort of a B minus job. Not because Donald Trump wasn't trying to do what he promised to do. He was. But as Congressman Biggs from the great state of Arizona, where I'm from, pointed out, people like Secretary Nielsen were not supportive of the president's policies, and they drug their feet on these things. Congress, on the other hand, is a flat-out F. You know, you had people like the outgoing Paul Ryan who just did not support the president's policy. You had a very good bill that Congressman Biggs introduced into Congress, and so what did Paul Ryan do with it and the leadership do with it? They did not put it on the fast track. They assigned it to 7 different committees, which is their way of saying this is going to die the death of a thousand cuts.
So what he was saying, so without any leadership, I mean, Paul Ryan's gone, okay, but like, what's the prospect of moving it forward?
The prospect of moving that bill forward is probably not great, honestly. You're right. We have a lame duck session. I don't think Paul Ryan, who's still the speaker until January, is in a big rush to do something
fair
like
point.
that.
He's still there. Okay,
he's still there.
Okay, well, all the reasons that you've set out, it's just so frustrating that this isn't happening. Really frustrating. Sorry. All right. Got to move on. Okay, according to the East Coast political and media elites, President Trump is a narcissistic dummy who does nothing but tweet and watch TV. Oh, and by the way, undermine democracy, of course. I have new information for you about why that is precisely wrong. Next. Welcome back. Over the Thanksgiving break, I read this book by Bob Woodward, Fear: Trump in the White House. When it came out in September, the snooty elitists on the East Coast salivated over its juicy gossip. Trump watches TV a lot. and the story it told of a president they see as an ignorant, dangerous barbarian. Here's a few of the condescending highlights.
It is a stunning look inside the Trump presidency, exposing a chaotic White House led by a man who has said he believes the key to power is fear.
I think that what Woodward has presented here is a devastating portrait, Brooke. We've heard about chaos, we've heard about dysfunction, but the details in this book are like nothing we've ever heard before.
All the anecdotes certainly ring true to the man we know and the man who never evolved or stepped up when he won the presidency.
Oh, my gosh. Right, the East Coast elite held up this book as evidence of why Donald Trump is not fit to be president. Well, either they haven't read the book or they're deliberately distorting what's in it. What Bob Woodward has actually done is write a book in praise of President Trump. The Woodward account, in fact, tells the story of a president who is totally focused on his agenda, clear about his priorities, and obsessed with delivering the promises he was elected on, but blocked at every turn by almost everyone around him. Former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, former Economic Chief Gary Cohn, former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, current Defense Secretary General Mattis, and especially Rob Porter, the White House staff secretary who resigned in disgrace over wife-beating allegations. These men were in President Trump's inner circle, and they literally plotted and schemed with each other to overturn the result of the 2016 election. Donald Trump's signature issue for decades has been trade. He was elected to get out of TPP, NAFTA, and other trade deals that hurt American workers. He couldn't have been clearer about it.
We are going to stop the TPP, totally renegotiate NAFTA, one of the worst trade deals ever made by mankind, and protect every last American job.
From day one, the president wanted to deliver on that by introducing tariffs and renegotiating trade deals. But globalists, including Gary Cohn and General Mattis, did everything in their power to stop him. Another central theme of Donald Trump's campaign was his promise to stop America's involvement in endless foreign wars.
I will never send our finest into battle unless necessary, and I mean absolutely necessary, and will only do so if we have a plan for victory with a capital V.
And yet, the globalists in his team tried every trick in the book to get the president to break his promises and carry on with the failed policies of the past. It's the same on immigration. One of the most distinctive elements of the Trump 2016 agenda was its promise to end the elitist consensus for uncontrolled immigration that for decades delivered cheap labor to big business Republicans and easy votes to establishment Democrats. Could anyone have misunderstood what Donald Trump was saying?
As far as the wall is concerned, we're going to build a wall, we're going to create a border, we're going to let people in, but they're going to come in legally. They're going to come in legally, and it's something that can be done.
But on this issue, too, we learned from Bob Woodward's reporting that far from undermining democracy, as the East Coast elites scream every day, President Trump has been battling to uphold democracy by delivering the policy changes that people voted for. Far from describing an unfit and clueless idiot in the Oval Office, the Woodward book portrays a clear-eyed and resolute president fighting exactly the elitist enemy he was elected to fight. The only problem is the enemy is within, not just within his own administration, but within his own White House. Now, some of those people have gone. Rex Tillerson, Gary Cohn, Rob Porter, they're out. But far too many are still there. Next week, we'll be in D.C., right in the swamp, and we will bring you a special edition of Swamp Watch, the swamp in the White House. Yes, we will name names. You do not want to miss it. The swamp in the White House, next Sunday from D.C. Tell me what you think of all that at Steve Hilton X and at NextRevFNC. Chris, I want to go to you first on this. You've been a real champion for exactly the kind of agenda that the president was elected to deliver. I mean, I think you've seen some of this blocking from inside the administration. It's really close. It's not just the deep state we talk about all the time, the federal bureaucracy, the millions of people out there trying to block the agenda. It's inside the White House.
No, it's inside. It is inside the White House. I mean, this is Donald Trump was right when he said two years ago that he was building a movement, and he was right. Building a movement, right? There's two parts to that. There were not enough people there who were already bought into the Trump agenda on day one back in January of 16 or before that to staff all the positions. And so what did he do? He had to grab people from, old Bush people, old Romney people. These are people who do not support the president's agenda. They think that it is their job to stop the president. Why? That's left to their own thoughts. But Donald Trump is the one person who was elected by the American people on a very clear platform of putting Americans first, whether it be on trade or on immigration. Those two issues, of course, are related, or on these foreign wars. He's the person who put that out there, and people flock to him as a result of that. It's amazing to me when you talk about immigration and foreign wars, you see these exact same people, you see these globalists who are willing to, in fact, eager to use American troops to defend the borders of Somalia or Iraq, but not the American border. Not our own American border and American interests. That is just beyond the pale for them. But can we ship 100,000 troops to the Middle East? Oh, sure, any day of the week.
What a great point. So, Candace, look, I've worked inside government. I've seen, what it takes to overcome some of this kind of opposition, internal opposition and bureaucratic inertia and so on. And the truth is, sometimes to get things done, you've got to bang the table and scream and yell and be slightly demented about achieving your promises. Now, all of that is described in this book very accurately. Now, the opponents of Donald Trump say that as, oh, he's crazy. But actually, he's crazy in trying to do what he was elected to do.
Yeah, I take great exception when people suggest that he's either unstable, crazy, or not smart. I mean, clearly he's brilliant. He just won against the establishment and up against the mainstream media as well. And people always want to bring up his tweets. Oh, he shouldn't be tweeting. No, that's exactly why he won. He understood that he could harness the power of social media to get around the media and to speak directly to the American people. Being able to harness technology is something that's been done by presidents in the past. FDR harnessed the power of the radio. We had JFK who harnessed the power of the TV. Donald Trump is harnessing social media to get around the mainstream media who will tell nothing but lies about him and speak directly to his constituents.
And Tezin, I mean, do you reckon some of this must be familiar in terms of the opposition to Bernie Sanders from the Democratic establishment?
Yeah, it was very familiar at the beginning of this campaign. When he talked about trade, how that was important to him. And you even remember how he was talking about we need to get something controlled, get some immigration control.
Yes,
all of a sudden, that seemed to kind of dissipate. So we'll see if he picks that back up in 2020. So a lot of the reasons why I joined the Sanders campaign is exactly for that reason, not because I'm a socialist, but because I believe in trade, because I believe in making sure that people are paying their fair share, if they're using our resources. So we'll see how this shapes out in 2020. I'm actually quite envious on the left side to have a president that's so clear. I wish Barack Obama and other presidents, proceeding from the Democrat side were actually so clear and so focused on their base the way President Trump is. You don't have to like him, but you got to respect him.
Right, and that is exactly why the elitists hate him. Thanks, all of you. Coming up, one of the world's top jobs experts on how the elites can crush American workers or restore them to their former glory. Details next.
Every 15 minutes, Fox News headlines 24/7 at Channel 115.
The election of President Trump and his focus on bringing jobs back to America shone a spotlight on the troubles facing the working class. And while most agree that progress has been made in the last 2 years, my next guest warns that unless Democrats and Republicans change the way they think, we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. He's senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research and author of the new book, The Once and Future Worker, A Vision for the Renewal of Work in America. Oren Cass. Oren, I think you've written a really important book. Just tell us the argument, if you could, as concisely as you can.
Sure. The argument is that work matters, Steve. It's that we've spent all of our time on economic policy just making sure people can consume more stuff, that they have more cheap stuff, and not worrying what happened to workers, their ability to actually contribute to their communities, to support their families. And we need to turn that around and make sure that workers are at the center of how we do things.
So specifically within that, one of the things I was interested in is your focus on the nature and quality of work, the dignity that people get from that. Just talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, sure. I think what we have to understand is that work is really important to individuals, to their sense of life satisfaction, We know from a lot of social science studies that it's really important to their mental health, to people's happiness. It's important to their families, to forming families, to keeping families together. It's important to kids and their outcomes. And so while a lot of people today just talk about a job as, pursuing your passion and changing the world, that's not what work is about for most people. For most people, it's about having a purpose, about having a way that they contribute to their community, and then about having a way to support their family. And when we don't pay attention to that, and when we let that go away, I think we see the results, which is really serious problems now for a lot of the country.
So what are some of the forces that have undermined the good work that you're describing?
Well, I think there's a whole range of policies. One that we really need to talk more about is the way we do education in this country and the obsession with college for all, and the idea that either you get a college degree and you go work in an office somewhere, or somehow you're a failure and not good enough. And that's just not true. Most Americans don't even earn a community college degree, but there are plenty of great jobs out there for people with less education, and we could do even better for them if we actually focused on them, if we didn't just let them fall by the wayside, but we said, you need a path from high school into the job market, we're actually going to focus on you instead of just focusing on the kids in college. If we flipped that around, I think we could make a tremendous difference in people's lives, and really a tremendous difference in our culture, so that we respect work wherever it's being done and whoever's doing it.
And just final question, how does this fit in with those big trends we're seeing in terms of technology and automation and globalization, the trade argument? How does this connect with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. From the perspective of consumers, if all we care about is more cheap stuff, then trade, automation, all of these things are just the same, and we say it's all good. If we actually care about workers, then these things are really different. And automation and robots can actually be a worker's best friend. When you bring more robots into the factory, usually that means the factory can make more stuff, the workers can earn more money, the community thrives. If you just shut down the factory and move it somewhere else, obviously that's a disaster. And so we have to separate these things and realize that the work and having the work here and having the production in this country is important, but we should celebrate automation. We should celebrate bringing more technology into the workplace so that workers become more productive, and that's what's going to bring their wages up over time.
Oren, fascinating. Thank you so much. I'd love to talk to you more about it, and I hope we'll find a time to do that
That'd be great.
soon. And congrats on the book. It's a great book. Thank you so much for joining us. All right.
Thank you.
Chris, let's start with you. Again, central to the whole Trump argument, this question of work and and American workers.
Yeah, this is at the heart of something that Donald Trump tapped into 3 years ago. Now it's 2015. He started talking about what was going on, particularly in the upper Midwest, but elsewhere with the working class, lower middle class, but also the anxieties that the broad middle class has. Am I going to have a job when I'm 50? Is my job going to get outsourced? Is the factory going to close? Because these things have been happening in this country for 30 years. So what do you do about it? Oren Cass wrote a great book, and I've read the book, and I salute him for it because he focused back in on some of those core issues. He obviously came at it from a bit of a different place than the president did, who was tapping into big, broad issues. Cass was talking about things that we can do about that. Central to that, and I think he gets this exactly right, is to elevate production, meaning work, over consumption. We've done a great job of building a consumerist, materialist society. But I'm not sure that's something that we really wanted to spend our time building. We want people to have an attachment to their work, to their communities, to their families. And a big part of that is, well, what do I do 9 to 5? How do I do something that makes me productive, where I can stand on my own 2 feet and have the dignity of earning an honest dollar?
I know. Look, I'm really sorry to say this. We're out of time. I'm not going to be able to have you to come because it's such an important topic, and maybe we'll find a way of squeezing it in. But we're going to come back to it because it's a really big one, and it's so interesting politically as well because it's all about Donald Trump's effort, again, very strategically, I think, to make the Republican Party the party of the American worker. That is really interesting. All right, I'm so sorry we're out of time. Coming up, lost in all the argument over Florida recounts was a surprising and fascinating detail about the particular group of voters who helped make Ron DeSantis governor. We'll tell you who they are and why it matters next.
Pay attention. Only days left for you to become a Fox Nation founder.
Get new can't-miss live opinion shows daily and documentaries and specials that tell the real stories behind the headlines.
Exclusively on Fox Nation.
Plus, get limited-time available exclusive merchandise and Fox Nation special access to events with your favorite personalities. Stories done right, politics done right.
Fox Nation, opinion done right.
Become a founder now.
Everybody.
Lights.
Good morning, everyone. Deal or no deal? The incoming Mexican government pushing back on reports that it has reached an agreement on asylum seekers with the U.S. as President Trump reiterates his stance on enforcing legal immigration. The White House preparing for a high-stakes summit with China's leaders, and House Republicans break out their subpoena power during their final weeks in the majority. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Trish Regan in for my friend Maria Bartiromo this morning, and this is Sunday Morning Futures. Mexico's new leadership denying a reported deal over President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy for migrants seeking asylum. All this as the president threatens to shut down the government over border wall funding, as well as the southern border itself. We're going to get reaction from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to this one. House Republicans subpoena former FBI Director James Comey and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch as part of their investigation into misconduct at the DOJ and FBI leading up to the 2016 election. Will they finally get the answers they have been seeking before the Democrats take control of oversight? And President Trump will meet face-to-face with Chinese President Xi at the G20. Will both sides signal that they're ready to discuss a deal? We're certainly getting indications of that. Could we possibly end these escalating trade tensions and stop intellectual property theft? A preview of what to expect and what the president's message should be as we look ahead right here today on Sunday Morning Futures. Okay, but we're beginning right now with the incoming Mexican government at this point shooting down reports of a tentative deal with the Trump administration. A deal that would require asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their claims go through the courts. The White House has not commented on those disputed reports, but President Trump remaining defiant on Twitter, saying, and I quote, "Migrants at the southern border wall will not be allowed into the United States until their claims are individually approved in court. We only will allow those who come into our country legally. Other than that, our very strong policy is catch and detain. No releasing into the U.S. All will stay in Mexico. If for any reason it becomes necessary, we will close our southern border. There's no way that the United States will, after decades of abuse, put up with this costly and this dangerous situation. We're not going to do it anymore." Joining me right now with reaction, Republican Congressman from Louisiana, Representative Mike Johnson. He's actually a former constitutional law attorney, and he sits on the House Judiciary Committee. He is also the incoming chairman of the Republican Study Committee, which is the largest caucus of conservatives in Congress. It is so good to have you here, Representative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Trish. Good morning.
Good morning. All right. So what do you make of Mexico saying, yeah, no, not really going to happen?
Well, the back and forth is just another verification that we need to clean up our immigration system. We have an asylum crisis, and everyone knows that. We commend the president for doing his job. He clearly has the legal authority under Section 212 of the Immigration and Nationality Act that Congress gave the president. He has the authority in the interest of national security to suspend asylum entry or to add restrictions. And so he sees this as a national security threat, many of us do, and we need to get on top of it. So his action right now is perfectly appropriate, and we support it.
Okay, so there's this incoming government there in Mexico that says, no, we really haven't struck any kind of asylum deal. Does it even matter? I mean, do we even need any kind of asylum deal with Mexico? Can't we say, all right, we're changing our policy, this is how it's going to be?
We can. Now, we're a very compassionate nation, but we're also a nation of laws, and so we've got to enforce those laws. We want to allow people refuge when they're seeking legitimate persecution, when they're in legitimate fear of persecution for their families' lives or their own lives. That's the way our legal standard has been over the years, but it's been abused in recent years. I mean, if you look at the statistics, in 2015, the Department of Homeland Security under the Obama administration allowed 81% of persons who claimed asylum, without showing any proof of that, into the country. In 2016, they allowed 88%. Basically, the word got out that this was a rubber stamp. You could come to America in a caravan or in large groups, and we would just allow you in, whether you had a credible fear and needed asylum or not. Those days are over. We've got to fix that problem. The president gets it, and this is the first step, a necessary step, I think, to clean it up.
All right. You know, you think about the asylum claim and how difficult it is and has been historically to make. And you also think about people that are coming here, sir, from faraway places, right? So if you're coming, for example, from Bangladesh or Pakistan, you have to get on the plane and get here, right, to make the asylum claim, which is actually kind of logistically, I would think, difficult because you need the right kind of visa in order to get on the plane in the first place. Very different than, say, illegally crossing a border opening.
Well, that's right. And the crisis clearly is at the southern border. We have this Central American caravan now. The folks from El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala who are headed our way, they're not in credible fear, we believe, many or most of them, in fear of their lives. They just don't like the conditions in their home countries. That's not a standard that allows someone to come in and avoid our normal processes to acquire citizenship in this country. We have to get on top of it. I introduced a bill early last year to clean up this asylum problem, to clarify what the credible fear standard is and make sure that it's not abused with fraud going forward. We passed it through the House Judiciary Committee. It was made a part of the Goodlatte bill, the comprehensive immigration bill reform that we got on the floor, but we didn't get it passed. We've got to get right back to that. Congress can assist in this, and I think we have a duty to do that.
Let me ask you about Mexico's part in all this and whether Mexico can be assisting in it. The president tweeting this morning, and I quote here, "It would be very smart if Mexico would stop the caravans long before they get to our southern border, or if originating countries would not let them form. It is a way they get certain people out of their country and dump in the U.S. no longer. Dems created this problem. No crossings, exclamation point." You know, he's saying it would be smart if Mexico would do this, but I don't know if Mexico has the right incentive to be of any help whatsoever, because as he goes on to point out, you know, they're getting some of the bad folks in some cases out. And I don't know why they would suddenly change their tune and say we're not going to allow it anymore. Do we really need to be putting more pressure right now on Mexico to do its part in all of this?
I think that's what the president's trying to do, but we have a new administration coming in. They take office in Mexico, the new president, December 1st. So we're just, we're right around the corner of having a new relationship with a new administration. I think that's going to be an important one for us. Mexico has an interest as well. They're concerned that Central American migrants and refugees would be coming through Mexico in droves, caravan after caravan. If we don't stop this problem right now and address this crisis appropriately, Mexico and the U.S. are going to have similar problems. So I do think that they can be a partner with us. They should be. They should be an ally. I think they have an interest in doing so, and we'll see how that unfolds in the coming weeks.
Okay, back to us for a second. Talk of a shutdown, potentially. I mean, if the president doesn't get the funding he has been asking for this border wall or some kind of increased security plan, do we see a government shutdown?
Well, we certainly hope so. Look, this is a national security interest of ours. We know that there are harmful human traffickers, drug cartels who take advantage of our porous border and have for years. We know that dangerous, radicalized terrorists come across the border undetected and find their way into the country and take refuge there, plotting who knows what. We know that we have illegal opioids and fentanyl and harmful drugs that come across the border every single day. So we have to get on top of this. It is a national security interest and a top priority of the president and the Congress, and we've got to make do on that.
And you're willing to risk that government shutdown, right? I mean, because that's, you know, tends not to go over well with Americans, and both parties wind up getting blamed, and people are going to be even more angry with you than they are right now. But is that what it's going to have to come to?
I don't think it's going to come to a shutdown. I think that you have people on both sides of the aisle who understand how important this is. There are disagreements about the details about how much wall you need and whether you need an actual physical wall or drone technology or all these other things. There are details in the discussions about it. But I think overall everyone understands that this truly is a top priority, and I don't think we're going to go to a shutdown over it.
Democrats, too, they understand it's a top priority?
Well, I think quietly and individually they do. They don't. It's not their party talking point, as you know, but they understand that this is a crisis. Everybody can turn on the television and see that we've got a serious problem. We've got to get on top of it.
Yeah, see, sometimes I wonder if the talking point is more open borders, and there's no way that Donald Trump and his administration will see one penny of taxpayer dollars going to any kind of fortitude for that wall. I mean, I just wonder politically if they can even get there, sir, right? Because they've dug in their heels on this whole idea that somehow having borders is not American. And so if they turn around and say, okay, we're going to put money into financing a wall or financing drones or whatever it takes, I don't know if it works for them.
Well, it's a foolish idea that we don't need borders, of course. And the open borders camp, I think, really is a minority in the Democrat Party, although they're very vocal. I think there are some reasonably minded people on the committees of jurisdiction who understand that we've got to secure that border. And I'm confident and optimistic that we'll get it done. I don't think it's going to take a government shutdown, and I